Say what's cracking, YouTube? It's your boy 16 to life, and I'm back like I'm on a parole violation. Yard down. Now, for those of y'all that's new to my page, in 1994, I got arrested. I was eventually sentenced to 16 years plus life. I served 24 years straight in the California prison system. During those times, I accumulated some good stories and some good insight on things related to prison. If you like this video, hit the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment. Most importantly, hit that notification bell. That way, anytime I drop a story, you can hop on it ASAP Rocky. Now, with that being said, let's hop right up into this video. Now, a lot of times in my comment section, I'll get questions from people asking about the lack of unity in the California Department Correctional Prison System among the blacks. And when they hear about some of these riots and stuff, they ask, well, why don't the brothers out there see the bigger picture? And so I'm going to try to give you my opinion on things that contribute to the lack of unity. One of those things, of course, being that people have to understand that too, that you have Southern California and you have Northern California, which is basically two different cultures. And so I'm going to speak more about the Southern culture in California, of course, because that's where I grew up and I was raised. And those are the things that I know much more about, right? So now, in my opinion, let's start with the Crips. Now, the Crips were formed in 1969. They say the Bloods was formed shortly thereafter, around 72. So let's say maybe about 74, 75, maybe 76, up in there somewhere, that the killing between these two organizations really started, and it jumped up from the shootings and stuff, from just the fist fights and stuff like that, right? And so that's one of the problems right there, that the animosity between these two organizations goes way back a long time. And then, of course, this animosity, this anger, is passed on from generation to generation to generation, right? So when they happen to come in confined quarters, something like the penitentiary, sometimes it's hard to hash out all these old beefs, and they refuse to see the bigger picture, right? Which, of course, is trying to make sure all of the blacks are safe as a whole and as a race. And then also, they say that the first real major Crip on Crip war started around 78, of course, with the Rolling 60s and the H-Rays. And so what ended up happening behind that is, eventually a lot of these different gangs started affiliating themselves with either one side or the other. And so there was a big split and a divide in the Crip unity, right? They say in LA County, it's about, and this is just LA County alone, you have about 200 different Crip sets. Then you have about 82 different blood gangs, and that's just in LA County alone, but you have many other counties who send gang members, of course, to the penitentiary. You've got Kern County, you got Fresno County, you got Sacramento County, you got Orange County, San Bernardino, Riverside, and that's just to name a few. And so when these people get locked up, there is, unlike other organizations, the Crips and the Bloods now that's in the California prison system today, they don't have any bylaws or constitutions that they must follow. At best, they have loose, unwritten rules. And so, of course, now you have certain things like that's etched in stone. Certain things like no stealing, no snitching, and a few other rules. But it all just depends on what particular prison you land at. By it not being any rules, you may get at one prison, and whatever car you run with, certain things are not allowed. Then you get at another prison, and those things are allowed. It just all depends. And sometimes, by me just keeping it real, you may not necessarily have the most sharpest intellectual individual running the car. Sometimes it may just be the dude who has the biggest, who's the best fighter and who has the most brute strength that's running that particular organization. So sometimes when things are not being ran from a a logical aspect, you have certain things that may be permitted at this prison and not be permitted at that prison. And so that's, and keep in mind also too that the gang mentality pretty much is this here, that, you know, my gang is tougher than your gang, I'm tougher than you, I'm bigger, and I'm badder than you. I mean, that's the mentality that a real gang member needs to survive, you know, because you don't want to be pretty much overran by another individual. And so when a person adopts and subscribes to that type of thinking, what he is pretty much preventing himself from doing is sometimes being educated in certain situations. You know, a lot of times as gang members, we have the mindset that nobody's gonna check me, nobody's gonna tell me nothing. But sometimes, you know, a person trying to inform you on how to move or go about things in a better way is not checking you. But like I said, the gang mentality is, it does that to a person. You know, a lot of us feel that, you know, if a person is not from our area, he's not gonna tell us what to do. And so that brings us to problem number one: communication. You know, when for whatever reason you have individuals from different factions who don't want to, or who fail to communicate with each other and with all of the blacks, that of course makes the blacks very vulnerable. You know, that makes them unprepared in a lot of situations. You know, where prison, we already know the California prison period, but especially the California prisons, due to the racial politics, is a place that can have spontaneous and deadly violence any given day. And so when you don't have communication amongst these different organizations and factions, then you don't have decision making. You may have a select few who want to feel like going to war and taking off is the right thing to do. Then you have maybe another select few from another organization or whatever who feel, okay, no, you know what, I'm not taking off, you know, that wasn't right, or your homie was wrong, or whatever, because there's no order, there's no structure, you know, there's no rules that everybody's gonna follow and stick to. And that's another thing that really, in my opinion, hurts the blacks in a lot of these situations, because of course, when you don't have communication, you don't have decision making, that leads to a lot of people not being ready, not being vigilant. You know, now if you have a certain faction in prison, and like I say, with the blacks and just with the Crips alone, there are a lot of different factions. You know, you have the gangsters, you have the hoodsters, you have the Compton Crips, you have Hoovers, you have the Long Beach Crips, you know, the Inland Empire, the Crips from up north, Northern Cali Crip Car and stuff. So it's just so many different organizations and stuff, that if a person can't get on the same the wavelength as the next person, it's definitely going to be hard, right? So you may have an organization, right, and they have numbers in the California prisons, and I'm talking with the blacks, and then you may have their opposing their a group that they beef with on the street, right, that they go to war to, and they may have deep numbers too, but due to the fact that these guys have a lot of violence and animosity between each other, they are failing to talk and get on the same page and prepare themselves. So even though they should see the bigger picture and realize that coming together is better for the race and better for blackness, but we got to keep in mind that when these individuals, we have gang mentalities, and you're out there on the street and black people are your enemy, you really don't care about the black movement or the betterment of the black population. And that's just, that's just a sad truth of prison, right? And so sometimes, you may have, like I said, you may have a group that has a very very hateful attitude towards another group, and they may not even warn those people that is beef in the air or whatever, or those people may have got into the beef, and you may have a faction who are, like I say, on the streets, they're opposing factions, and they may not feel like getting involved is worth it. You know what I'm saying? And then also to slightly add, like I said, the difference between the two cultures, Southern California and Northern California. You have a lot of areas in Northern California who don't have Crips and who don't have Bloods. And so I'm sure that if a riot breaks out and now it's a racial riot, they pretty much have no choice to at least defend themselves. They may not get in it wholeheartedly, but I mean, when you're in a riot and it's a racial riot, you at least have to defend yourself, right? And so, but the effort you put into defending yourself may not be the effort a person would put in when he's on the attack. But by those guys not having Crips and Bloods up there, if the issue is a Crip and Blood issue, they may feel like, hey man, you know what? I'm not putting my life on the line for something that I'm not even involved in, something that I disagree with. So, like I say, I understand that too. And then we also got to keep in mind that there have been a lot of animosity, a lot of violence at some point in time between certain factions from Southern California and Northern California too. And so all those things play a big part, right? Another thing that I've seen in prison is the alienation of people who should be included. And when I say that, what I'm talking about is, once again, the gang banging mentality sometimes come out, and as gang members, sometimes we have a tendency to bully our own when it's not necessary and it's not called for. You know, in my opinion, anytime a brother doesn't have bad charges or go against the grain and break unwritten laws, he should be made to feel like he is included. You know, case in point, when I told that story about the actor who played in Three Strikes, I believe now he's on the John Singleton movie or the film or whatever. You know, you guys know exactly who I'm talking about. The guy who played Stacy, right? In The Wood or whatever. Now, when he came to prison on the yard that I was at, eventually dudes started to harass him, you know, lightweight, try to bully him, and they didn't make him feel included, right? So what they really did was push him away from the people he should have been hanging with. You know, they didn't make him feel like he was accepted, right? Solely based on because he wasn't from a gang. Now, a riot didn't jump off, but let's just say a riot jumped off around that time, right? And let's say he didn't participate. Then you would have had brothers mad at him and upset because he didn't join in the gang or he didn't join in this riot and defend his people. But how can a person expect a person like that to want to join in the gang and defend his people when he first pulled up, his people didn't embrace him and make him feel like he was part of that people? You know, I've seen situations like that, you know, happen a lot, right? It may be, you know, over things like the showers, the phones, being in canteen line. You know, sometimes a person is gonna have he's gonna have a habit to look out for his homie. You know, we may all be coming in from the yard. Everybody wants to get a shower before they go to the cell. So, you know, especially when you don't have any homies to look, you don't have any homies on the yard that's going to look out for you. You may say, hey homie, who has that shower next after you? Oh, my homie got it. Then my other homie got it after him. And just little small things like that can have a tendency to push a person away. Then he may say, okay, yeah, my homie JoJo got it. Then when JoJo comes in, you say, hey JoJo, who got the shower after you? Oh man, I ain't getting in the shower. I'm going back outside. So now when you start to see that, you know, it's a lot of BS going on, you start to feel played and you start to feel like you don't matter to these people. So like I said, when you feel like you don't matter, why should you be willing to put your life on the line when the situation turns racial, right? And of course, you know, in all organizations, you're always going to have some internal beefs, some in-house fighting. But from what I've seen from the outside looking in, other races, everybody's a homie. Everybody's made to feel equal, you know, to a certain extent. Everybody looks out for everybody. And so when that type of, you know, when that type of respect is not being reciprocated, we don't realize that we tend to push others away, right? And to keep in mind that from the studies that I looked up, the blacks only make up 28% of the prison population, right? I believe the Hispanics were like 44%. Now, you may have some people who say, well, all the Hispanics don't get along and this and that or whatever. And they definitely are broken up into different factions as well. But like I told you guys, the majority of prisons that I done time in, there were no Northerners there. They were all Southerners. So at those prisons, they pretty much were all unified. You know what I'm saying? And so it's just a lot of stuff that goes on, man, that for whatever reason, it hinders the blacks from failing to see the bigger picture. Right now, I've spoke many times about being from the Inland Empire, and the Inland Empire is basically the county of Riverside and the county of San Bernardino. Now all those people from those counties who choose, we all, when I first came to prison, we all would push under one collective, Crips and the Bloods. Now, from time to time, you may hear people rumbling like, oh man, what type of gang members is they are? What type of gang members are they? You got the Crips and the Bloods hanging out with each other and stuff like that. And so that was true, right? But you can look at it like this too. That collective was put together to preserve and protect those who happen to be from the Inland Empire. I was told that back in the earlier days, when people from these smaller towns, smaller cities who hit these prisons, who didn't have a lot of homies and friends on the yard, they were being bullied, taken advantage of by these gangs who were from areas who had a larger amount of homies on the yard. And so that's the reason, to my understanding, that the Inland Empire was put in place like that, and everybody chose to push as a collective, right? So to be honest, if we could get all the brothers in the penitentiary to think like that, and we all come together as a collective, it would make everything better, and our safety would definitely be better looked out for, right? But like I said, when we don't realize these things, sometimes in certain situations, especially in riots, we end up having to pay for those situations because we're not as prepared, we're not as together as we should be. Like I said, if a riot is brewing on the yard, and you got maybe half the black population who wants to take off, the other half don't even know about it or going on, everybody's not necessarily prepared and under one accord. So anytime you happen to be fighting on the defense rather than the offense, it's not a good look, especially when you are fighting in a situation where your life is on the line, your life depends on it. Even that first 5 seconds, 10 seconds of being caught off guard, in that few seconds of surprise, could cause a person his life. And so I spoke to one of my homies who's still locked up a couple of years ago, and he was telling me that the Northern Hispanics and the Southern Hispanics, were backing each other up when it looked like things was going to happen with the blacks. And I told him way back then, I said, man, hopefully, you guys in prison can finally get it together, because, this is a situation that can become extremely, I guess, problematic and potentially, life-threatening for the brothers, man. And so, I don't see why, not saying that they haven't, but I don't see why under situations like this, they can't realize to see the bigger picture. But sometimes, tribalism and individualism, it runs so deep. And when you don't have intellectual dudes in prison who are respected, you definitely have a lot of intellectuals, but when you don't have intellectual people that are respected, this is where the problem lies, right? Because like I said, gang banging at its core is individualism, and it is not having respect for a person that's not from your organization. And so now you have a lot of different groups in prison who had alliances back when I first started going to prison in 1996, but now they're letting the beast from the street dictate the nature of their alliances up in prison. And I've seen a lot of internal beefs before I left, of collectives that was once extremely tight. And when I say internal beefs, I'm talking about melees between those two cars. I've seen the Compton and Watts get into it. I've seen the Inland Empire get into it. I've seen the neighborhoods go at it with each other. I've seen the gangster car go at it with each other. And when I first came to prison, like I said, those were things that didn't happen. You may have, this dude who didn't like that dude and they would handle their business. But as far as just all out melees, 8 on 8, 10 on 10, stuff like that, back then it didn't happen. So anyway, that's my opinion right there on certain things that contribute to the lack of unity among the blacks in prison, and that's the cost of it sometimes. So hopefully, for those of you guys who asked me a question, hopefully I explained it and gave you a good answer. You already know what time it is. It's your boy 16 to Life. Resume normal program.